Hi everybody and welcome back to Capricorn Radio. This is your host James and I am super excited about today's show because we're going to be getting into some mystery today, and who doesn't love a bit of mystery? We're going to talk to today's author Keith McCluskey, and he has wrote a wonderful, interesting book on the Dyatlov Pass incident. Now, if I haven't got the pronunciation right for this, I'm sure I will be corrected in due course, but the Mountain of the Dead, the Dyatlov Pass incident, published in October 1st, 2013. Get yourself a copy of this. It's a prolific research material into this fascinating, mysterious event that has occurred in Russia. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on today's guest and get a little biography from him. So without further ado, hi Keith, you're very welcome to the show.
Yep, hello James, I'm very pleased to be here, and hello to all your listeners.
Oh, great to have you here, Keith. And you're in my part of the world as well. It's I must have about 1 in 20 guests from the UK, so it's nice to have somebody at a reasonable time.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's usually if it's the USA, I'm up at 4 a.m, so it's nice to get a reasonable hour this time.
Yeah, well, that's it, Keith. That's it. I got you fresh and clean. And I've heard some of the shows you've done on this. This is a super fascinating story, Keith. But I think what really differentiates you is it's a no-nonsense approach. You've taken this on and really synthesized all the data, all the evidence, all the interpretations, all the evidence, and really put a very clear, concise insight into this whole mysterious event. It just gets more mysterious. Before we get into that, Keith, and I just want to mention that for the audience, tell me about who you are, Keith, who you are as a person, what you like to do, why this interest.
Okay, well, my name's Keith McCluskey. I was born in Dublin, but I grew up in West Africa. My dad worked out there, and I spent probably most of my early childhood out there with regular visits back to Dublin. Sort of came back to England and went into export trading, but I've always had quite varied interests, and I would say that there's two things that interest me in particular. One is military history and aviation, jointly, if you like, sort of military aviation type stuff, and also mysteries. And I first came across this particular story when I've been researching Russian or Soviet military history for many years, and that's how I first came across the Dyatlov story, and it was really intriguing. Two reasons. One is there's no set answer to it. You know, it really is a mystery like the Marie Celeste, because nobody really knows what's happened. And the other one, the other aspect of it that really intrigued me is it was in the Soviet Union, so there was the added, if you like, secrecy and mystery. It's always been a very tight on security type of place. So, you know, the society in the old Soviet days was everything was strict security, strict need to know type basis, and I think they sort of added to this the mystery about the Dyatlov story, because it's only really come into prominence since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the breakup of the Soviet Union. It's really starting to get a bit of traction now in the West, the whole thing. There's, as you probably know, there's been a film about it by Rennie Harlin.
Oh, yeah.
You know, whether or not, you know, it's your cup of tea, I have to be honest, it wasn't my cup of tea, but nonetheless, you know, there's a film being done about it, and I suspect there'll be other films made about it, but, you know, people are really starting to get into it, but it's you know, there's a lot of twists and turns to it, and that's why I like it, because a lot of mysteries seem to have one most probable answer to it, even if you can't prove it.
Sure, exactly.
With this story, it's Yuri Kuntsevich, who I regularly correspond with, who runs the Dyatlov Foundation in Ekaterinburg. His view is it's like a gigantic knot. He says you undo one knot and then you find another one. You know, it's like a massive rope that's all been tied up and nobody knows how to get to the bottom of it.
You know, First on the Russia angle, I mean, yeah, Russia's mysterious in itself, as you quite rightly point out. Yeah, there's so many different answers that have, or supporting answers that have been given to the answer to this mystery, like any mystery. And you're right. In other mysteries, there is usually one answer given and it's wrapped up and pushed away. But this is the monster mystery of all, because there's so many answers that have been given. And they may answer a couple of things about the aspects of the case, but there's not one of them of the answers given answers all the aspects. None of it works. And the mystery stands.
No, that's right. That's right, James. The thing about it is, you wonder if it's been set out like this, because no matter what path you go down, it doesn't answer all of the questions. You know, if you come out, we'll go through the theories in a minute, but, you know, if you go down the avalanche theory, well, there's things that are unexplained about that. You think, well, it could be an avalanche, but, you know, this says it wasn't an avalanche. You go, you know, and other people have a Yeti theory, and, you know, there's the military accident theory, which I tend to favor, I have to be honest. But I keep an open mind on it. You know, I think what some people tend to do about this particular story is they'll say, as far as I'm concerned, it's an avalanche, and that's the end to it. And what you do with that is you're closing your mind off to other possibilities. You know, everything then has to fit your view of what it is. I came in for I mean, I've said this in other interviews, I came in for a bit of flack from some people because I included a theory in my book called the Yuri Yakimov theory. That's the name of the guy who put forward his view. And it's, I'd say, a kind of a UFO type theory, if you like.
Yeah.
He was, you know, I mean, I don't know if you want to discuss it now, but he was working up in a mine not that far from the Dyatlov Pass, actually. And he had a strange experience one night with some lights that he was working in a pit, and these lights appeared.
Interesting.
And his immediate impulse was to get away from them. He was frightened of them, and he hid for a while. And he found that when he looked at the lights started coming towards him. It sounds, you know, I don't know if you want any foul language on here. I'll say a load of nonsense. But he met another guy, a forest ranger, who, this was a couple of years later, a forest ranger, a very dour, older Russian guy who'd been living in the forests all his life. He had exactly the same experience. And this guy had a gun with him, you know, a rifle, which he used to protect himself from bears, you know, and wolves, any other wild animals that might have been dangerous. But, he had exactly the same experience with these lights. He'd made a fire one night, and these lights sort of shone on him from a distance away. When he stared at them, they started coming towards him, and his overwhelming feeling was one of fear, and he hid himself and then left it for a while until he heard a noise, and then looked, and the lights had gone. Now, you have two people here who have exactly the same story. You could say they're in collusion, maybe, who knows. But I included it in the book because it was quite an interesting take.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I'm open. I'm an open guy, you know, and I'll look at any evidence. I don't care. I'm not prejudiced to evidence. I think once you start being prejudiced like that, you're ruling out options. To be honest with you, the avalanche. We'll get into the details of the story in a moment too. But the avalanche, I think, is the one that really is the most lacking. And I think a UFO, some sort of a related phenomena, would probably, you know, answer a lot of problems. But then that you need to have an acceptance or a belief in UFOs. So I can see there's difficulties in that. But I do think that may answer a lot of other questions. The Russian military, again, that's still got some favor too. So we have some contenders, serious contenders, but I definitely think some of them could be ruled out in terms of common sense. Before we get into that, I mean, and what I like about yourself, Keith, is that you have a narrow interest in, and that's, you know, I'm the same. I've got these narrow interests, and when I meet other people with narrow interests, these are the people, and I see it, these are the people that bring something to the table because they're able to keep their attention on the case, the attention on the data, not rule out anything and look at all evidence. And I know you've done that from the work that you've presented. At what point did you come past this narrow interest in and really get kind of soaked up in the mystery? At one point did you get past this Russian military narrow interest and then just get, totally blown away by the mystery of this?
Well, it was when I first contacted Yuri Kontsevich. I asked him for more information, and it was only after talking to him that he started, I started looking at the pictures and talking to him about the possibilities. You see, he also keeps a very open mind on the whole thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was over visiting him, he's contacted, obviously, by a lot of people pretty regularly, and I get people contacting me virtually every week putting forward theories. And some of the theories are quite interesting. There's been quite a few in the last year or so. There's people contacting me with some very interesting theories. There's a lot of other theories that I would tend to discount. One of the ones, just for example, that was put forward was they were all climbing a tree and the tree snapped and they all fell on top of each other and broke all their bones, and some of them crawled away. And you think, well, maybe, but it doesn't explain how they got there wearing next to nothing and, decided to climb a tree. But, like I say, I try and be open-minded about it. But as I say, I started getting into it when I started talking to Yuri about it and started looking at the pictures. I mean, the pictures are the thing that really got me going about it, because it brought the whole thing to life. Mm-hmm. This wasn't a story. We hear about the Marie Celeste and you think, okay, well, we've seen a sailing boat. We know who was on board, but it's in your imagination. Sure. A story like that, or you read it in a book, but the pictures for this really bring it to life for me. They took photographs when they were on their way there, and that within a couple of days they're all going to be dead. There's something about it that really hits you in the gut, those photographs, and you sort of look at them and you try and think, you almost want to try and ask them through the photographs what happened. Yeah, that's how it affects me. When I'm looking at the photographs, they haunt me.
Sure. Yeah. And there's such a lot. There is a high quantity of evidence at the scene as well, and we're going to get into that. Keith, let's start with the audience in mind here. How many people were there? How many people died? What happened? A general premise for the story, and then we'll get into the actual evidence and interpretation. Okay.
Well, what they were doing, a lot of people are saying, "What the hell were they doing up there in the first place?" But there was a group of 10 of them had got together to. It was called ski tourism, which was very popular among students in the Soviet Union because, and it was encouraged by the authorities because military applications to it. You need to be very fit. You need to be good at map reading, and finding your way around in forests and sort of, you're not anywhere near civilization. They're all skills that you can turn to use in the military area. So, and it also requires a very high degree of physical fitness. Mm-hmm. But they enjoyed it. It was very popular among students. And what they were doing, it was a test of they'd set out a route to Mount Otorten, which in the local Mansi language means don't go there. But I'll come to that in a minute. What the titles of the mountains
go there.
mean.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's about 500 to 600 miles north of the city. Was called Sverdlovsk in those days. It's Ekaterinburg now, but they'd set out north on their journey on the 23rd of January in 1959, and by all accounts, everything went pretty smoothly. They took a train north, then they took a bus after they got off the train, and then they took a lorry, and then they went on foot for the last 70 odd miles. And one of the students, Yuri Yudin, fell ill. He was actually ill on the way. He was not feeling very well at all. They reached an abandoned woodcutter's settlement on the 28th of January. This is almost a week after they left. And he decided to turn around and come back. So we know everything that happened, if you like, up to that point, because he was with them. We have the photographs as well, but he was there, so he related the story of how it all went up to that point, and there was nothing untoward. After he left them, even with the photographs and the group diary that was kept, nobody really knows what happened to them, except until the day their bodies were found.
So 10 people set off, one gets ill, pulls back out of the situation.
And the other 9 continue.
The other 9 continue.
Yeah.
The other 9 then, this is mind-blowing, this part. The other 9, let's say kind of the blunt of what happened to them, and then try and work back from there.
Okay, well, they continued towards their goal, and this is where it starts getting a bit peculiar, because where they ended up, which is, again, this is the Mansi language, Holat Siakal, which is probably as near the pronunciation as I can get, which means dead mountain, strictly speaking, but it's also called Mountain of the Dead because of the dead that have been found there.
Mm-hmm.
The Mansi, which was the local tribe, gave names to various places, all names with meanings. Otorten, which is where they were going, don't go there, means don't go there in winter because, they're tribesmen who herd reindeer, and it's a difficult place in winter to get to and all the rest of it. So each name has a kind of a practical meaning. Dead mountain means it's not much good for growing stuff on, it's pretty barren. That's what it means. But like I say, it's got other connotations to it now. But just coming back to the actual journey of the group, they weren't going there at all. That wasn't on their planned route. Yuri Yudin himself had said that he didn't really know why they were there. It was they were 9 miles south of where they were going, and they pitched their tent about between 4 and 5 o'clock on the 1st of February. There was quite a strong wind blowing. It was minus 27 degrees centigrade. It was really cold. The snow was about 4 to 5 feet deep. So pretty inhospitable conditions. They didn't keep a diary for the last day, the 1st of February, so we don't really know why they were up there. And the odd thing about it is that they were all skilled map readers. Igor Dyatlov, whose name has been given to the place, he was the group leader. He'd actually been up there the year before, so you'd expect him to have, known his way.
Oh, sure.
So anyway, so they pitched their tent that night, and coming into the night, they would have pitched the tent by about 5 o'clock in the evening. The sun went down at 2 minutes past 5 that day. About 2 to 3 hours after that, something happened, and we don't know what, that caused them to slash their way out of the tent, run down the mountain to the tree line, which was about 1/8 of a mile away from where the tent is. And that's where the bodies were found. Virtually 3 weeks, just over 3, nearly 4 weeks later.
Do you think the tree line was for protection?
Well, you see, again, it gets odd there because I did a program with on this for the Discovery Channel, and there was a mountaineering expert who was there to give survival advice. And he was saying to me that they were down by the tree line, but he said if it had been him and he'd run away from the tent, he doesn't understand why they didn't go into the trees for further protection from the wind. They were found on the outside, just on the outside, the perimeter of the tree line. He said it seems odd that they stayed there. They didn't go in. You'd get more shelter, he said, going into the actual forest there. So, you come into the theory then, was there something in the forest they were trying to avoid? Was there something frightening them? But then why had they run away from the tent? So, one of the first things you come to after they've run away from the tent is, why didn't they go and get more shelter in the trees?
Wow. It's incredible.
Yeah. So, anyway, just to go on, they were meant to have returned around the 14th or 15th of February, and Igor Dyatlov was meant to have sent a telegram on the 12th of February to say that they were on their way back from the 1st. civilization they came to, which is a village called Vizhai, and that's been burned down now years ago in a forest fire. But he was meant to send a telegram back to say, "Oh well, we're on our way back." Anyway, that telegram never arrived, and they were due back, as I say, around the 14th, maybe the 15th. They allowed a few days because obviously you can't keep the strict deadlines doing something like they were doing. But time went on, people started to the parents were getting agitated, their friends were starting to wonder what had happened. And there was a lot of inertia by the authorities to get, not necessarily a search party going, but when people were saying, well, there's no sign of them, what do you think's happening? The authorities didn't seem as if they wanted to do anything. It was only when parents started complaining to high party officials in the Communist Party that something actually started getting moving. And there's theories about that. You're coming back to, was there a cover-up? Was it something to do with the authorities and the military and all the rest of it? But anyway, they eventually got their act together, and search parties started going north to start looking for them. And the search party started heading up on the 23rd. So that's, over another week has been lost from when they were due to have arrived back. There were several search parties sent up, and the tent was found on the 26th of February after 3 days searching. And the following day, they found the first two bodies by a cedar tree, and they were almost naked by a fire. And there's all sorts of theory. There's a theory that they suffered from hypothermia, and what happens when you're dying from the cold is you get what's called paradoxical undressing, where you start undressing yourself, because the blood comes back out to the extremities, and you're not far from death when that happens. But these guys, the first two that they found, Doroshenko and Krivonishenko, they only had their underwear on. They'd been stripped of their clothes, and their hands and their feet were burned. They'd been putting their hands and their feet into the fire to try and warm them up.
We're just coming up to break, so just for the webpage, you can go to capricornradio.com for the free archives and capricornmembers.com for the HD TV and MP3 archives. But for now, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in just a moment. There is something majestic in the land of Ireland. This is known the world over. The Celtic Irish are descendants of the Tuatha De Danann, a mysterious, supernatural race of gods written about in ancient Irish Gaelic texts. This is the basis for all Irish mythology, and our megalithic ancestors are interlinked with these peoples. You have a chance to come and see these monuments and temples for yourself. The megalithic landscape is rich in the realms of myth, legend and wisdom. Come see all this on the most spectacular Sacred Sites tour in March 2016. This Sacred Sites and Equinox tour is not to be missed. Tour highlights include Grillen of Aillock Observatory, the Giant's Ring Henge and Dolmen, St. Patrick's Day Special at St. Patrick's Ancient Chair, March 17th, Knockmany Passage Tomb linked to the Queen Maeve with special access, Beemore Temple Complex, Dunluce Castle, the Giant's Causeway, Beltany Stone Circle, Kilclooney Dolmen, and the Loch Crew Equinox Event Alignment. Of course, we will see the famous tombs of Newgrange, Noth and Doth, also Fornox Rock Art and Shamanic Chamber, Tara Hill Complex, and we're going to finish at the Tuatha De Danann's origins in the northwest of Ireland at Carrowkeel, dated 3500 BC, and the famous Carrowmore 5000 BC complex. check out all the full itinerary on the tours events page for more details at jamesswagger.com. Welcome back to Capricorn Radio. This is your host James, and don't forget to check out the archives at capricornmembers.com. You can subscribe for membership, doing a lifetime membership deal at the moment. And of course you can still check out the free archives at capricornradio.com. And then HDTV shows as well on the Capricorn members page. But for now, I've heard mixed reports now, Keith. Is there any evidence to say that these guys had radiation burns, as in...
Well, I'm just going to come to that. When they started finding the other bodies, the next two bodies that were found were Igor Dyatlov and what was his girlfriend, Zina. They were found as if they'd been trying to make their way back to the tent. They both frozen to death. A few days after that, they found the body of Rustam Slobodin. He was in the middle of the two of them, which shows you how deep the snow was, that they hadn't found him for a few days after they found the other two, and they were all three in a straight line. Mm-hmm. And then it was 2 months after that before they found the remaining four bodies, and they were 70 meters away. It looked as if they tried to create a kind of a den, if you like, to protect them, but they had suffered the worst injuries. The two of them in particular were very badly injured, Luda and a guy called Zolotarov, Semyon Zolotarev. They had crushed ribs. Her nose had been flattened into her head as if she'd been punched really hard. All the cartilage was broken and smashed. They're quite horrific, and all her ribs were cracked in a straight line. What the autopsy said, it looked as if they'd been in a car crash, but without any external markings on their bodies, which adds further mystery to it.
Incredible stuff, Keith. Yeah. Incredible stuff. So we have 9 hunters. They go to Mount Otorten. Just how remote? Just paint a picture for this Dyatlov Pass incident. Its actual physical location. How remote is this place from any sort of help, or the nearest city, or the nearest town? Even how isolated is this location?
Well, it's about. The thing is, you're up in the mountains where they were. If you like, what they were doing. The Urals runs in a north-south line, and what they'd done was they'd followed it parallel, if you like, and then turned in. But the nearest village was about 80 miles away. You get the odd sort of, settlement of Mansi, but they're nomadic and they tended to keep to themselves. But the nearest help was, when I say help, the nearest village was 75, 80 miles away.
Wow.
And that was just a tiny village. The nearest town was probably another 20, 30 miles after that. The nearest big city where they'd come from was 500 miles away. And that's where really all the help was coming from. They had to bring up everybody to, assist in the search. So, you're talking, literally hundreds of miles away from real help. Mm-hmm. You're out on your own. And the thing is, you've got, unless you experience it, you've got no idea the conditions up there because, the snow's 4 foot deep. To go out of your tent without adequate clothing or covering, and some of them ran out of the tent after they'd slashed their way out of it. Some of them didn't even have socks on. So you're going into 4 foot deep snow and running away from the place where it's going to keep you warm. You're not going to survive very long.
Well, evidence I've looked at, and it's not a conclusion, it's an acute observation. It's like something individual happened to each person from the same force. It's just they got different levels of it.
Something frightened them. There's 2 lines you can take. Something scared them so much that they slashed their way out. It must have been immediate. It's not like let's go out the front and see what it is. It was like grabbing knives just to get the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. It is a theory that something had affected their brains more or less all at the same time. and drove them mad, if you like. There's been talk of chemical weapons. A couple of theories have been put forward that you can, say like magic mushrooms, but fly algaric was one of the theories put forward,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that's diluted from, pardon my language here, but reindeer urine, but it gives you hallucinations.
Gotcha.
I'm
familiar,
you could, the something used by the Mansi. So, maybe they were students out for a bit of fun, and somebody thought, well, let's try this stuff,
Again, the problem is, Keith, we have what's a circular argument in the mystery of all this, where some of this may explain the behavior, but then it doesn't explain the physical injuries. And sometimes you can explain the physical injuries, but it doesn't explain the behavior. And that's where the mystery keeps going. It
does. It keeps coming back on itself. You see, another thing about Luda Dubonina, she was a very forthright girl, very strong character. I've said this before in interviews. Apparently, she was known for speaking her mind. If she thought you were an idiot, she'd say it to your face. And her tongue was missing. The autopsy didn't say that her tongue had been cut out. It just said it was missing. But there was a large quantity of blood found in her stomach, which would imply that when her tongue was removed, she must have been alive to have swallowed the blood. Otherwise, she wouldn't have swallowed it into her stomach. So that's a peculiar aspect of it. A lot of people focus on the tongue. There's been other theories that have said, well, maybe it was microbes or something had eaten the tongue away, but why eat the tongue away and no other soft flesh? But the fact, and Yuri Yudin, the survivor, said it himself, that it seemed odd that her tongue should be missing when she had, if you like, the biggest mouth out of all of them.
Wow. Do you think that these people could have done this to themselves?
Well, but again, why would they? The thing is, I think of some of the injuries. People say, oh, they fell into a ravine or so, but there was no ravine to fall into. I've seen you can see the pictures of the den where they were.
Mm-hmm.
The snow drifts, so they were found under 12 foot of snow when they found the remaining bodies. The snow would cushion your fall anyway. A lot of them had injuries to their heads. So if you're falling, all right, your arms might flail a bit, but one of your natural instincts is to try and protect your head with your hands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't explain the if you like, the injuries to the fractures to the skull. And because some of them had fractures to their skulls, and to get a line, and almost an exactly straight line down, breaking all the ribs of two of them, almost implies that they both fell the same way and fell on the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, it's almost impossible, but it looks like as if some kind of machine had done it.
Incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And so you think, well, how would you do that? How would you break your own ribs without any mark on the outside of your body? Because there was no marks on any of the bodies either. That's the thing that really puzzles everyone.
Do you consider a supernatural force, whether that's of this earth, or somewhere else?
Well, you have to look at that. I run this through my head. Several
Mm-hmm.
times a week. You try and look for an angle on it and think, well, what could have done it? And the trouble is, you think, well, is it man-made? Don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily follow the UFO theory, but I'm open-minded enough to think that,
Mm-hmm.
let's face it, it's a great big universe out there, that if something had come down and caused injuries like that and then gone away, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. Okay, it has to be proved. But so does every other theory have to be proved.
Why the UFO element, to answer this? Is it because of the radiation, possible radiation burns?
Yes. Yeah. The thing is, radiation was found in the clothes of some of them. It's peculiar the way they carried out the autopsy, because they compared the organs of them, and they didn't stipulate, who whose organs they were. It's like the bodies were dissected, and the organs of members of the group were compared with organs and the bodies of people who'd been in car crashes in Sverdlovsk, who died well, I say died normally, but died in a relatively normal accident. So it seemed peculiar to do it that way, like to compare the heart of somebody from the group with the heart of somebody who'd been killed in a car crash, but not to say whose heart it was. But the two of the jumpers were found to contain traces of radiation when they examined them. Mm-hmm. But you see, that comes to another peculiar thing. Lev Ivanov, who carried out, he was the policeman in charge of the investigation. When he went up there, he had a Geiger counter with him. But, policemen in those days didn't have, you wouldn't take a Geiger counter to investigate what might have been a murder.
Incredible.
It's a peculiar piece of he must have been given the Geiger counter by somebody higher up in authority. You don't go measuring radiation unless you have a reason to do so.
Is it true that their hair had turned grey?
Well, yeah, I mean, the hair was an unnatural colour.
Okay.
You could say there was also the skin was a kind of a tan colour. Yeah, but you can possibly explain some of that away. Yuri Kuntsevich, he was 12 years old at the time, but he saw the bodies and he went to the funeral, and he said that the hair was gone grey and the skin had an unnatural colour, but you could maybe put that down to being exposed to the elements or whatever, but again it's another aspect of it. But bodies have been found in the Arctic with dark hair from 100 years ago, are perfectly preserved. So
sure.
there is that aspect. You could say, well, if bodies can be preserved totally in the Arctic, why weren't their bodies preserved?
Mm-hmm. I know it was 1959 for the incident, and things may be different today, but did they have any protection for bears, or was it bear country? Did they have any guns? Did they have any protection in case anything happened to them?
Well, I mean, they weren't carrying any weapons. The thing is, bears are hibernating at that time. Anyway, there was no animal tracks. The only bear that would have created a problem, that they call them shaitan or shaitan, which means wanderer in the local language. They're bears that are not hibernating because they haven't been able to get enough to eat, and they are extremely dangerous, and they'll attack anybody or anything if they can get hold of them for food. But there was no animal tracks there. There was no animal tracks found. The only thing that may have presented a danger to them would have been a large pack of wolves. But, wolves are a bit like humans, in a way that why work too hard for your next meal? If you can get it easy, wolves go for some, rabbits and easier prey. If they're going to attack, say, reindeer, that's quite a big animal for even a group of wolves to attack. It means a lot more work. A group of 9 humans, all pretty fit, would present quite a challenge for even a large pack of wolves. But as I say, there was no animal tracks around.
Could they have been on any sort of research mission for a clandestine agency, if you will?
Well, yeah. I mean, two of them had worked at Chelyabinsk, which is south of the Ekaterinburg, and it was a closed. Well, Sverdlovsk was a closed city at the time as well, just about everywhere in the Urals seems to have been closed. But there was a nuclear research facility going on, and two of them, Krivonyshenko and Kolovatov, were both had worked with nuclear materials. And there's a theory that that there may have been a clandestine mission. Zolotarev was much older than all. They were all around, early 20s. Zolotarev was much older. He was actually old enough to be the father of some of them. He was approaching 40 years old. Mm-hmm. And he's a bit of a mystery in the whole group, because people say, well, what was he doing there? because he's that much older than they are. It's not really a mystery that's explained very well. But when you're coming back to a clandestine mission, why would you, go right into the middle of the mountains to hand something over to somebody, some secrets or whatever? It's a pretty difficult place to get to. It's a possibility, but it seems an awful long way to go to hand some material or documents over when you can meet somebody on a street corner and get back in time for your tea.
We're just coming up to break, so just for the webpage, you can go to capricornradio.com for the free archives and capricornmembers.com for the HD TV and MP3 archives. But for now, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in just a moment. Greetings everybody, I got a quick announcement about a very unique conference coming up in Mexico with yours truly, James Swagger, and my good friend Mr. Gerald R. Clark. You'll find all the information on the web pages, geraldclark77.com and jamesswagger.com. A little bit about the conference. In the Yucatan, the Anunnaki realm of the Maya, Equinox Ascension Symposium, September 2015, and of course we're going to link that up on the websites, geraldclark77.com and jamesswagger.com and capricornradio.com, and you'll find all the links there on all the web pages. And this is going to be unique for me to do this, Gerald, and unique for you too, I know. Great to put our minds together and to put a venue on and talk about this stuff in a practical sense, where people can come and join and learn, philosophize, and also ascend, Gerald. So
yeah, well, I'm really, really excited about it. Yeah, listen, and the fact that we're having this level of dialogue couldn't be possible unless you were doing what you're doing. I very much appreciate you being a student of the information and seeking to understand.
Well, understanding is the key to everything I do, Gerald. All the philosophy I look at and all the research that I do, it's all for understanding. Of course, coming across your two books, The Anunnaki of Nibiru and the most recent Seventh Planet Mercury Rising, it ties so many things together for me. Of course, I'm going to be speaking at the conference myself. I'm going to be on site. I'm going to be doing a little bit of the tour as well. What I'm going to speak about is the global megalithic culture. Archaeoastronomy, I'll focus on the Maya. Archaeoacoustics, I'll also focus on the Maya. Altered states, ancient cultures and awareness. Sacred science and geometry, entheogens versus acoustics in altered states. Processional numbers and numerology. Megalithic sexagesimal codex and Sumerian sexagesimal number system. Again, the Anunnaki realm of the Maya, Equinox Ascension Symposium. That's going to happen in September 2015 on the Equinox, obviously, finishing on the Equinox event at the Pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. Of course, we're going to tie in your Anunnaki Nibiru connection with Quetzalcoatl, Chichen Itza, the long count calendar with Egyptian origins, Ascension Temple, the Emerald Tablet connection to the Mexico's pyramids that we talked about on the show, holographic state of reality, presenting models for that, keys to breaking the illusion of matter, the Tolkien calendar, again what we talked about in galactic timing. It's going to be super fascinating presentation, Gerald, on your part. I can't wait for.
Yeah, the people that are coming will have their own private entrance gate to go right to the temple. So there'll be some hands-on stuff. Go and experience it for yourself, not just be looky-loo. We're gonna tie into deep knowledge of our history with part of it that's spilled over there. And listen, I've started getting issues about who are the gods in the Viking in this culture, and I'm starting to do that because this is true for everyone around the world. So yeah, the Mayans are going to wake up to find out that Quetzalcoatl was the mankind's consciousness coach and the author of the Emerald Tablets, and that's a profound thing to realize.
Well, again, Gerald, I'm so excited about this whole thing, the conference, the location, the venue, the place we're going to stay at has its own access into the archaeological complex, and the transfer of knowledge, the networking with the people there, and of course the meditation. It's just going to be a wonderful 5 days. Of course, everybody can check this all out in the YouTube description, follow the links there. Or of course, if you want any more questions, contact us. But I think everything is on the page for the symposium. So. Welcome back to Capricorn Radio. This is your host James, and don't forget to check out the archives at capricornmembers.com. You can subscribe for membership, doing a lifetime membership deal at the moment. And of course, you can still check out the free archives at capricornradio.com. And then HDTV shows as well on the Capricorn members page. But for now, is there anything special about the geography of the region, the mountain, either from historic lore? We'll bring in the Mansi in a moment as well. But is there anything specifically obvious different about the geography? Any mining or anything that's unusual about the region?
There's a lot of mining going on up there. That's another one of the theories over there, which was only suggested recently by a guy called Steve Smith. In the USA, he said he came across mining was actually state controlled, but there was obviously illegal mining activity for gold and other precious metals. There's still mining in the Urals, and he put forward the theory that they come across an illegal mining area. People, because it was considered an economic crime to be mining on your own account, and it would get you the death penalty if you were caught. So there would have been very good reason for somebody to silence you if you caught them doing that. But then you're talking about a group of 9 people. So, you'd have to overpower them all and kill them all. Zolotarev, just coming back to him, and I've said this before in interviews, he'd won medals for close combat fighting on the Russian front against the Germans in the Second World War. So he wasn't a wuss by any stretch of the amount. Obviously a guy who could still take care of himself and wouldn't have been frightened easily. But the other thing, just going into folklore, and it's not something I've got much on, but it's supposed to be the lair of the Golden Woman up there, who resides in the northern Urals and is guarding treasure, if you like. And the Golden Woman is in the folklore legends of the place, who can kill people with directed energy. But it's not it's an area that's been looked at by Philip Mantle, who's very much into this sort of thing, and he's bringing out some research on it.
You mentioned the Mansi a couple of times. Let's talk about the Mansi, these indigenous local people. Tell us a bit about them, describe them. I believe they helped the military rescue operation. Let's bring these guys in.
Okay, well, the Mansi, occupy, they live in that area. There's not a hell of a lot of them. You're talking about thousands rather than hundreds of thousands, but they're nomadic and, they're reindeer herders. They live off the land. And when the bodies were first discovered, suspicion fell upon them initially. They thought that the Mansi had murdered them. For what reason? One of the reasons being that some of the Mansi have sacred sites up there, but it was a bit of a far-fetched theory, I think, because the Mansi were generally quite helpful they always have been to anybody passing through. They tend to keep to themselves, but they're not hostile. There was a story that in the 1930s, a Soviet female geologist had been tied up and thrown into a lake and drowned up there because she'd offended one of their sacred sites. But when I made inquiries about it, and Yuri Kontsevich confirmed it to me, he said, well, nobody can find any trace of this female geologist, that's supposed to have been murdered by them. So it's just a hearsay story. But like I say, the suspicion fell on them originally that they'd murdered them all. But Lev Ivanov discounted made inquiries when the chief investigator. He made inquiries and he discounted it almost immediately. And they actually were very helpful. They brought their dogs in to help the search and assisted wherever they could. And the other thing about it as well, I think another reason why the Mansi would have been keen to help. I think in Soviet times, indigenous peoples were quite wary of central authority. They didn't go out of their way to attract attention or, how can we put it, annoy the authority, the central authorities or the police. If they'd done something like that, they knew they would attract a hell of a lot of attention, and they just wanted to be left alone to go their own way. So, everything argues against them having committed the crime. And another thing about it, they lead pretty hard lives, the Mansi. In those days, especially, they lived in huts. They were nomadic. And one thing that argues against the group being killed by them or escaped prisoners, which is another theory, they had flashlights, knives, axes, there weren't sleeping bags, there was blankets. There was a lot of things that would have been of use to, either the Mansi or people on the run or whatever. All those things were left behind.
I'm just soaked in mystery at the moment, Keith. It's unbelievable.
Well, you can't, you can't help it. Everything we talk about, you can discount, you can find reasons to discount it. That's the trouble. There was another theory, is the, special forces, that US special forces or Soviet special forces, that they came across a secret experiment. But, I come back to the theory, why would you have a secret experiment in the middle of winter up in the middle of nowhere? Well, it's possible, but it's not likely. But when I come to the Soviet military accident, for me, that's plausible because these things have happened. People get killed in an accident. The authorities would be, the military would be embarrassed. Everybody else connected with it is embarrassed. You don't want to highlight it, if you like. And that's why I tend to go down that path, because you're coming to, somebody has to be held accountable for it, if you like. You got 9 young people in the prime of their lives. Zena, one of the 2 girls in the group, was destined for stardom within the Communist Party, a lot of people say. And, so you've got all these not necessarily important people, but highly thought of people, killed by, a Russian bomber, which is one of the theories. They dropped an air mine, a parachute mine, which had exploded, and the force of the blast had killed them. So they tried to concoct a scene to make it look as if that's, they'd all died in strange circumstances. The trouble is when you go into a lot of mysteries and you start digging around, unfortunately, you find there's a human hand not too far away at any point.
Sure. Did each one of the individuals who died, did each one have their own tent?
No, they were all in one big tent. What it was it was 2 tents which were being joined together to,
Gotcha.
It was meant to sleep 10 people. There would have been 10 of them had Yuri Yudin not turned back. There was actually 11 of them, but somebody didn't turn up,
Gotcha.
Luckily for him.
Luckily for him, yeah.
Yeah, but no, it was 2 tents joined together. It'd been made by Igor Dyatlov and the guy who found the actual tent, with the search party, who was a friend of his. They'd made it the one large tent 3 years earlier by sewing it all together. So they were all in one tent basically.
Incredible.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to, have we got a bit of time?
Oh, we've got lots of time. We got lots of time, Keith. Go on.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to go into, just expanding on this military thing. People would say, well, why would the Soviets, why would they want to pretend it was an accident? Well, the thing about, the Soviet Union in those days was, bad news was never welcome, I always say, but, and I give an example in my book. In 1979, there was a large biological warfare facility. It's still there, actually, although they reckon it's all gone underground now. In the city that they set out from, it was Sverdlovsk then. But in 1979, there was an outbreak of anthrax They were working on anthrax as a biological weapon. On the Friday, what had happened was they'd been cleaning the filters on the machines before anything was exposed to the air. The filters were meant to stop the anthrax spores getting out to the open air, and whoever had cleaned the filters had forgotten to make a note in the logbook. So the following week, when they started the machines again, there was a release of anthrax out into the atmosphere, which blew to the southeast of the city, away from the city. But as it was, over 100 people were killed by it. I remember when it happened, actually, but the authorities explained it away as being contaminated meat. And with the fall of the Soviet Union, or the breakdown of the Soviet Union, an American team was allowed in there in 1992, and they investigated it, and their investigation showed that it wasn't contaminated meat. It was actually it had been ingested in the air, which showed that they'd been working on biological weapons. And the reason for that was because, why they were so agitated about anybody finding out about it was they were breaking the terms of the 1972 convention on it. But the reason I'm mentioning it is because the KGB went around all the hospitals where the dead had been taken to, confiscated all the medical files, and told the doctors what was to go on the death certificates, which was meat contaminated by anthrax. So I put that example in to show that they're not beyond, doctoring evidence or changing the facts to suit, the narrative, if you like.
When you get through the evidence, Keith, and when you get through the mystery, you're looking at this in a logical way, you're looking at all the evidence piece by piece, and you're ruling out and eliminating and synthesizing the data. All roads seem to head to a paranormal event, even just by definition paranormal.
I have to say that, yeah. I must admit, if you'd have said something like that to me, I don't know, even 20, say 10 years ago, I'd say, nonsense. But I have got an open mind on it because there's so much about this that is unexplained. Even when you try and take the most logical, down-to-earth explanation, you still think, well, it still doesn't fit. There's got to be something else. That's what I have to say. I come back to the paranormal, and it's a thread that I don't discount at all. I really don't.
Wow. And that's why we need guys like you, Keith, and that's why I like it. You're following this from a very sane, very logical, very technical route, looking for this with a sane approach. You're not losing the plot at the very start and coming up with wild theories. As a matter of fact, you're looking at everybody's theory for the purpose of synthesizing the data. And like you just admit, when you get there and when you get through all that, that's the best type of research you can get because it rules out everything else and leaves a paranormal event. Whereas people just jump straight for the paranormal and then on all sorts of mysteries and it loses its credit.
Yeah, you've got to allow for the paranormal, I think, in this story. You cannot discount it. I know I'll probably be slated by some people for saying that, but when you look at it, there are so many things which cannot be explained that is, if you like, almost only the other explanation. It could be a military thing, but paranormal to me is up there with the military theory. It has to be because you just cannot explain it otherwise. And when you start looking at some aspects of it, the paranormal, I'm not going to go into those theories, but you think, well, yeah, there could be, there is something here. Lev Ivanov, one thing I didn't touch on, by the way, and I should bring this in quickly, is there was light orbs which were seen over the northern Urals. The last picture taken on one of the cameras shows what looks like lights coming down. And the lights had been seen over a period of time by a number of people. There was a group to the south of them, about 70 or 80 kilometers south. They'd seen light orbs. And Lev Ivanov had himself said that he had seen a mark on a tree trunk there that looked like a perfect circular burn, as if like a laser beam had been directed onto it. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned the light orbs sooner, but there's no explanation for these light orbs. People talk about them being rockets, but all the rocket firing or the missile firing was hundreds of kilometers away from that. It wasn't anywhere near the rocket lanes. So you can discount the missile and rocket theory.
Incredible. Keith, please take a moment to give out your website, any sort of links that you'd like, and where people can get a copy of your book.
Yeah, well, I've got two websites. I've got one on the Dyatlov Pass incident, which is what it's called. I'm not very good on my memory with that, www.dyatlov-pass-incident. But if you put my name in, Keith McCloskey, it'll bring up my author's website.
Gotcha.
And you can get copies of my books on Amazon. Well, what I would like also to say is I'm in close touch with Yuri Kontsevich, and I'm hoping to go back in 8 weeks' time.
Oh, nice.
There's an interesting development, which I'm not going to discuss now because I'm going to try and keep it I'm hoping to write a follow-up book on this.
Well, we've got to get you back on the show. We've got to get you back on the show for that one, Keith. Sorry, we've got to get you back on the show for that one, Keith.
Yeah. So, but there has been not too big a development, but it does point in a certain direction. But we're going to be going up and we're going to be looking at that. So,
you've already been to Russia, though. I have.
Yeah. But what's happened? Like I said, I can't say too much about it. We're going to be going somewhere to look at something. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's what I like about you, Keith. You're a hands-on researcher. You're out on the ground and you're out looking for this stuff. Do you think you'll get the solution to this, Keith, in the pursuit of this?
I hope so, because we're pushing all the time. We're pushing all the time. Both myself, there's other people. There's a lot of people interested in the story. I think if we keep pushing at it, I hope one day we'll get a resolution to it.
Of course.
And as I say, and I say it to your listeners, please keep an open mind, because that's the only way you'll get to the bottom of this.
Of course, at the end of the day, there's been 9 people lose their lives, and they've got families. I'm sure the people would like to know the families, the members.
Well, I mean, it's been said by 1 or 2 people. Why can't you leave the dead to rest in peace? Fair enough. I can follow that line, but equally, I feel we owe them an answer.
Yeah.
They're owed the truth. They obviously all know how they died, but nobody else outside knows how they died, and I think they're owed an explanation.
What does the family members think, or have they ever been involved in the research? Have any of them pursued this evidence? Have they been hushed?
They tend to be very hands off. To give you an example, 2 of them are buried in a separate cemetery in Ekaterinburg. Without going too much detail about it, but the Dyatlov Foundation, which is run by Yuri, he wanted to bring those 2 bodies over to the main cemetery where the others are buried. Yuri Yudin's buried there now with the others as well, but the relatives wouldn't allow permission for them to be exhumed and moved over. You can get permission from the authorities, but if there's a good reason, and to be fair, the authorities probably would have gone along with it to override the relatives' wishes, but nobody wants to upset the relatives, so it's been left. And what Yuri did was to move some of the soil near the graves of Krivonishenko and Zolotarev, move the soil over to where the other bodies are, to where the memorial is. So there's a piece of them there.
Wow. Well, Keith, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you today. I wish you every success in your upcoming research trip. I hope you get the answers you're looking for, and I actually commend you on your research. It's serious and it's dedicated, and it's just, I love to see people out there,
thanks very much. I mean, it may be a little bit dry, so I'd like to pep it up a bit, but to me, I just want to put the facts down because you can pep a story up as much as you want, but the facts are the facts,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always dealt in facts, I suppose, and it's only from the facts that you'll get the truth.
Well, that's it, Keith. Keith,
Yeah.
I thank you for your time today.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we're
Lovely.
going to talk to you in the not too distant future.
Great stuff. Thank you, James. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you
to all your listeners.
Keith, and I just want to mention that for the audience. Tell me about who you are, Keith, who you are as a person, what you like to do, why this interest.
Okay, well, my name's Keith McCloskey. I was born in Dublin,
Mm-hmm.
but I grew up in West Africa. My dad worked out there, and I spent probably most of my early childhood out there with regular visits back to Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of came back to England and went into export trading, but I've always had quite varied interests, and I would say that there's two things that interest me in particular. One is military history and aviation,
Mm-hmm.
jointly, if you like, sort of military aviation type
Mm.
stuff, and also mysteries. And I first came across this particular story when I've been researching Russian or Soviet military history for many years,
Mhm.
and that's how I first came across the Dyatlov story, and it was really intriguing. Two reasons. One is there's no set answer to it. It really is a mystery like the Marie Celeste, because nobody really knows what's happened. And the other one, the other aspect of it that really intrigued me is it was in the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
So there was the added, if you like, secrecy and mystery. It's always been a very tight on security type of place. So, the society in the old Soviet days was everything was strict security, strict need to know type basis. And I think they sort of added to this the mystery about the Dyatlov story, because it's only really come into prominence since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the breakup of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
It's really starting to get a bit of traction now in the West, the whole thing. There's, as you probably know, there's been a film about it by Rennie Harlin.
Oh, yeah.
Whether or not, it's your cup of tea. I have to be honest, it wasn't my cup of tea, but nonetheless, there's a film being done about it, and I suspect there'll be other films made about it. But people are really starting to get into it. But there's a lot of twists and turns to it, and that's why I like it, because a lot of mysteries seem to have one most probable answer to it, even if you can't prove it.
Sure, exactly.
With this story, it's Yuri Kuntsevich, who I regularly correspond with, who runs the Dyatlov Foundation in Ekaterinburg. His view is it's like a gigantic knot. He says you undo one knot and then you find another one. It's like a massive rope that's all been tied up, and nobody knows how to get to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm first on the Russia angle. I mean, yeah, Russia's mysterious in itself, as you quite rightly point out. There's so many different answers or supporting answers that have been given to the answer to this mystery, like any mystery. And you're right. In other mysteries, there is usually one answer given and it's wrapped up and pushed away. But this is the monster mystery of all, because there's so many answers that have been given. And they may answer a couple of things about the aspects of the case, but there's not one of them of the answers given answers all the aspects. None of it works. And the mystery stands.
No, that's right. That's right, James. The thing about it is, you wonder if it's been set out like this, because no matter what path you go down, it doesn't answer all of the questions. If you come out, we'll go through the theories in a minute, but if you go down the avalanche theory, well, there's things that are unexplained about that. You think, well, it could be an avalanche, but this says it wasn't an avalanche. You go, and other people have a Yeti theory, and there's the military accident theory, which I tend to favour, I have to be honest. But I keep an open mind on it. You know, I think what some people tend to do about this particular story is they'll say, as far as I'm concerned, it's an avalanche, and that's the end to it. And what you do with that is you're closing your mind off to other possibilities. You know, everything then has to fit your view of what it is. I came in for I mean, I've said this in other interviews. I came in for a bit of flack from some people because I included a theory in my book called the Yuri Yakimov theory. That's the name of the guy who put forward his view. And it's, I'd say, a kind of a UFO type theory, if you like.
Yeah.
He was, you know, I mean, I don't know if you want to discuss it now, but he was working up in a mine not that far from the Dyatlov Pass, actually. And he had a strange experience one night with some lights that he was working in a pit, and these lights appeared. And his immediate impulse was to get away from them. He was frightened of them, and he hid for a while. And he found that when he looked at the lights started coming towards him. It sounds, you know, I don't know if you want any foul language.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Capricorn Radio. This is your host James, and I am super excited about today's show because we're going to be getting into some mystery today, and who doesn't love a bit of mystery? We're going to talk to today's author, Keith McCluskey, and he has wrote a wonderful, interesting book on the Dyatlov Pass incident. Now, if I haven't got the pronunciation right for this, I'm sure I will be corrected in due course, but The Mountain of the Dead, the Dyatlov Pass incident, published in October 1st, 2013. Get yourself a copy of this. It's a prolific research material into this fascinating, mysterious event that has occurred in Russia. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on today's guest and get a little biography from him. So without further ado, hi Keith, you're very welcome to the show.
Yep. Hello, James. I'm very pleased to be here, and hello to all your listeners.
Oh, great to have you here, Keith. And you're in my part of the world as well. It's I must have about 1 in 20 guests from the UK, so it's nice to have somebody at a reasonable time.
Yeah. Tell me about it. It's usually if it's the USA, I'm up at 4 a.m, so it's nice to get a reasonable hour this time.
Yeah, well, that's it, Keith. That's it. I've got you fresh and clean. And I've heard some of the shows you've done on this. This is a super fascinating story, Keith. But I think what really differentiates you is it's a no-nonsense approach. You've taken this on and really synthesized all the data, all the evidence, all the interpretations, all the evidence, and really put a very clear, concise insight into this whole mysterious event. It just gets more mysterious. Before we get into that,
John here, I'll say a load of nonsense. But he met another guy, a forest ranger, who this was a couple of years later. A forest ranger, a very dour, older Russian guy who'd been living in the forests all his life. He had exactly the same experience. And this guy had a gun with him, you know, a rifle, which he used to protect himself from bears, you know, and wolves, any other wild animals that might be dangerous. But he had exactly the same experience with these lights. He'd made a fire one night, and these lights sort of shone on him from a distance away. When he stared at them, they started coming towards him, and his overwhelming feeling was one of fear. And he hid himself and then left it for a while until he heard a noise, and then looked and the lights had gone. Now, you have two people here who have exactly the same story. You could say they're in collusion, maybe, who knows. But I included it in the book because it was quite an interesting take.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I'm open. I'm an open guy, you know, and I'll look at any evidence. I don't care. I'm not prejudiced to evidence. I think once you start being prejudiced like that, you're ruling out options. To be honest with you, the avalanche, we'll get into the details of the story in a moment too, but the avalanche, I think, is the one that really is the most lacking. And I think, a UFO, some sort of a related phenomena, would probably, you know, answer a lot of problems, but then that you need to have an acceptance or a belief in UFOs. So I can see there's difficulties in that. but I do think that may answer a lot of other questions. The Russian military, again, that's still got some favour too. So we have some contenders, serious contenders, but I definitely think some of them could